unanswered until now, but I'm sure that other questions will be raised after the two interesting presentations and two special speakers invited for this period. The first of them is Tia Loukkola. Tia is the director of the Institutional Development Unit of the European University Associations, and she is in charge of the variety of EUA's activities dealing with improving and monitoring the quality of universities and their educational mission, as well as topics including quality assurance, recognitions, ranking, and learning and teaching. She developed a particular focus on providing services and supporting EUA's members, and I remember here the institutional evaluation program. Tia was a founder and was an important promoter of this idea, but in the same time now, Tia is one of the most important and resource person who is promoting teaching and learning initiative in European area. Dear colleagues, I have the pleasure and the honor to introduce to you one of the strongest voice and the highest professional expertise holder in the European teaching and learning area, and I'm sure that micro-credentials and micro-programs will be very interesting for our audience. Dear Tia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Romita, for the very kind introduction to my presentation. I am indeed going to talk to you about micro-credentials at this time. But before I do that, because I feel like so much commenting on the previous session, which I found very inspiring, I would want to come back to something that was said in the end of the session, where the speakers were talking about the fact that we've now we've come to realize in the universities that we need to change and we need to approach things differently. And now the crisis this year has indeed forced us to do that. I would just say that what we hear from our members as well is very much along the same lines that the two speakers said, is that we've been forced to do some changes right now, but we should also take the lessons learned from this year. This is what we hear from our universities. We should just not go completely back to normal, but to analyze what in this shock that we've experienced this year we can take away, and for instance, what works online and what works better face-to-face. So I think I've managed to start sharing my screen. So I'm going to change the topic a little bit here and talk about different kind of innovation and way to promote innovation and mobility, which is micro-credentials. This is based on the desk partly on the desk research we made in the context of the Microball project that EUA is partnering in. And the background for the Microball is that it is a project for a European higher education area, governments and stakeholders to discuss how we can promote micro-credentials as means to promote more personalized and flexible higher education and learning in our systems. It goes back to what Clara was saying about the new approach to student, what it means to be a student. Maybe our students in the future are no longer full-time students all the time studying for a degree, but maybe people will come and go and take modules in our systems, and micro credentials could be part of it. And how can we accommodate? This is the question. But what are micro credentials? We actually quite often hear the question, what are they? We talk about them right now in certain circles, at least globally, also in the other regions. Education systems are trying to figure it out. And there are also misconceptions about the micro-credentials. But if I give you a very short definition, It would mean that they are short or small learning experiences that lead to a credential. But sometimes also the term refers to the credential, the certificate that the learner gets in the end. There are a lot of definitions that then go further into details that describe different characteristics of microcredentials. They talk about the size and the purpose and how to categorize the microcredentials. Quite often, microcredentials are linked to digital. Most of the definitions talk about digital learning and providing education through that means. But I do want to highlight that there is also face-to-face, or at least besides to 2020, there's been face-to-face microcredentials being offered by universities. And maybe I'll come back to that a bit later. So there is no consensus. We're trying to figure out a consensus, for instance, in the and a definition in the micropolo project in the next 2 years. And the issue is that the lack of clarity about the definition is also leading to some confusion about this, and therefore these discussions at European level as to whether we could provide some clarity. But that being said, we do have different kinds of microcredentials. Maybe I could say that often, if you don't know the word microcredential, you might also know that there are MOOCs, there are badges, there are different modules whereby you can get a certificate. So this is what we are talking about. Sometimes I've heard the issue that microcredential means that it's a learning entity that is smaller than one's ECTS. That is kind of a misconception. Quite often, most of the definitions that we studied for this desk research, they talked about something in between a 5 to 20 ECTS being the size. But if we talk about why are we talking about this? What's the point, and why would universities need to care about this? We've looked into the motivations. What can microcredentials bring to our higher education systems? And here I'll just focus on the institutional perspective, which is that the institutions see them as a way to provide targeted and specialized training, for instance, for the labor market needs. And that way we can show better that we are responding to the needs of our local labor market. They may be a way to increase visibility and reputation. This comes into the play, for instance, with the universities that offer MOOCs and try to get to new learners through that means. And then importantly, I think for the topic that we are discussing today here is that higher education institutions report that they offer or organize microcredentials as a means to experiment with new pedagogies and technologies. It may be easier to take a short module or smaller module and try to experiment new things in it than trying to put it into the formal degree program right away. For instance, MOOCs have been one way where institutions have said that, okay, we will experiment here and then we'll see if we can take these methodologies into our degree studies. One of the reasons that this may be happening is that sometimes we do have in our higher education systems quite strict restrictions or limitations as to how much experimentation we can make in a set degree program. So then doing it outside the degree program may be easier from an administrative perspective. And this is where I come to what we've seen in Europe indeed, is that some of these microcredentials are part of existing degree programs. So there is a module within the program that you can go and take it and you will get a certificate for that one, whether you do the whole program or not. And this is linked to the modularization of the degree programs that has been happening in many countries as a result of the Bologna process, for example. But then the other type of microcredential are the standalone offers. For instance, continuous education centers are offering them completely separately, or even the departments, disciplinary departments. And that's where probably the most of the, let's say, the innovation capacity comes from. Some of these courses are credit bearing, others are not credit bearing. This is a choice that has been debated a lot. Is it okay to provide education where you don't provide ECTS, because that might then come to bite the learner if they want to use this credential afterwards for their studies. But that would be a complicated issue to discuss here. I would take an hour explaining the complications there. But in general, we have to say that the engagement of higher education institutions in this micro-credential business varies. And it is important to say that micro-credentials are not only offered by higher education institutions. There are a lot of other providers. And this is not a topic only discussed in higher education. It's also in the vocational education and in other fields of education or training in our society. So this is a wider issue than just a university or higher education institution matter. We did a survey last spring to European institutions at EUA, and we had over 300 responses across Europe. And it turned out that from our respondents, 50% indicated that they offer short online courses leading to certificates, micro-credentials, or badges. So the other 50% may not offer them at all, or they may be offering them in face-to-face mode. Similarly, half of the, practically the same figure, 49%, indicated that one of their main motivations for offering MOOCs is to reach out to new learner groups. So for instance, lifelong learners. 55% said indeed that they consider that these kind of short courses offer mainly, short courses mainly serve the lifelong learners. But we do see that a lot of the degree students are taking micro-credentials and aiming to use it for their degree. For instance, you go to another institution that has a specialized micro-credential on a topic that your own university doesn't offer, and then you want to carry that micro-credentials into your home university and use it towards your degree. And this leads to a topic that is probably then relevant to CIVIS, for instance. We've noticed that many of the European University Initiative alliances are developing micro-credentials or have identified micro-credentials as one of their key activity that they are offering for their students. And in that sense, they are perhaps driving further the development in this regard. That makes sense. I think it is very sensible thing to do, because it's probably is due to for instance, the legislative or regulative regulations that we have for our full programs. It's probably easier to start with micro-credentials. And because many of these are online, it's probably very useful in times of COVID-19. But I don't think it's only to do with the COVID-19, but it is part of this bigger development that we have towards virtual mobility. We have come to realize that you can offer a student a much more wider range of learning experiences, also outside your borders, by offering, for instance, micro-credential. So a student within an alliance or outside an alliance can take courses online also from other countries and get an international experience through that. Erasmus Plus is developing at the moment specifically virtual mobility, and their micro-credentials can serve a way to increase this kind of activity because it offers a clear module with a certification for students, and therefore they might also allow us to better recognize the students' learning, because the idea is that in a micro-credential you should normally, I'm saying should, it doesn't always happen, you should normally get a proper certification that tells you clearly what you have learned, and that is often the challenge with the recognition, that you don't really know what does this mean, what did the student learn there. But if the certification is properly made, it does facilitate recognition. So I do think in that sense, the micro-credentials do have a lot of potential to promote innovation and mobility in, or at least virtual mobility in our higher education systems. I started by saying that we don't really have a definition, one single definition for micro-credentials. That is true. But then again, the diversity of them is also, it should be seen as a strength. That is the one that allows us to innovate. That allows us to come up with different micro-credentials. That allows us to really think outside the box. So now that we are working in Europe towards a European framework for micro-credentials, the Commission speaker already referred to European Commission working on a European approach for micro-credentials. But also, as I mentioned, in the Bologna process, where we are discussing what does micro-credential mean. Whatever the framework that we are talking about is, I think it's important to say that they should increase clarity and transparency, but because they are lacking. But we should still leave room for diversity and creativity so that the micro-credentials could continue to be means for innovation. They do present an opportunity for higher education institutions to respond rapidly and flexibly to the needs of the society and the labor markets, something that our degree programs are often criticized for not being able to do. And they also offer us an opportunity to innovate and reach out to new audiences. I've referred to the lifelong learning mission of universities several times as part of this. However, the question that I would kind of wrap up with is whether micro-credentials will revolutionize higher education. In all the conversations that I've been involved in the past year regarding the micro-credentials, including the ones in the European Commission expert group, I think there is a clear recognition that micro-credentials are not going to replace our degree studies, our conventional qualifications. These are something, but they are something that can allow us to rethink how we organize our conventional degrees, and they also are a way for us to complement what we can offer to for instance, to lifelong learners in our degree programs. So they have potential to promote innovation, but we should also understand them in the context of the bigger picture, and that our conventional degrees are probably going to stay. And then I'm going to wrap up with the reaction to what I was listening earlier. And I was actually wondering that as I was listening to the two speakers tell us about the innovation that is happening in the universities already, and as part of the conventional degrees, degree programs, partly because we've been forced to do that this year in COVID-19 times. The question that then comes to mind is, do we actually need micro-credentials for this anymore? If we are doing this already in our degree programs, maybe this will limit the need for micro-credentials. But then again, we see at the same time that the labor market is changing rapidly as well. So there is a different need for micro-credentials, perhaps, so that we can prepare people that are seeing their work changing radically in these times. So I think it's a balance of finding right ways of innovating within the degree program and through the micro-credentials. And that's where I'm going to leave off at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tia. It was indeed a very interesting and challenging presentation for the people who are just eager to find out more information about micro-credentials and their role in designing and structuring our academic curricula, and how the micro-credentials are linking with other processes and structures inside universities' development areas, and why not the last questions rise to audience. It's very interesting. They will revolutionize higher education. That's an interesting and the questions of the moment, because we are reflecting on how micro-credentials will try to create a possible development line for what virtual mobilities are in this context. Digitalization is just forcing us to reinvent some techniques or some structures in higher education area. And why not micro-credentials could create a very favorable atmosphere for doing that. And in this respect, the next speaker, Anca, will try to familiarize the people and the audience with the idea of virtual mobility, and virtual mobility as part of the construction of new European Alliance curricula, and why not the linkages, the connections between micro-credentials and, of course, virtual mobility. Virtual mobility now is more important than others, because sometimes we're trying to replacing the physical face-to-face mobility with this new one. But the students probably will not agree with us. We shall see now, following discussions and probably at the end. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure, dear colleagues, to introduce Anca Nedelcu, the next speaker. As a senior educational specialist with an extensive theoretical and practical knowledge in the field of educational sciences, Anca is the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Psychology and Educational Sciences, and she was involved deeply in the consultancy and educational capacity building initiatives, both at governmental and non-governmental level. And I'm sure that Anca will give you now the opportunity to link and to create bridges between virtual mobilities and the micro-credentials. Thank you very much, Anca. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Romita. It's clear that we will try to build bridges between what was discussed until now and this last subject of the meeting. And we have the privilege to be somehow in the end and to benefit from all the very, very useful and important ideas which have been already discussed until now. Like Tia was saying, I was also tempted to react to the previous discussions that were very generous and rich. And it's a lot of food of thoughts, and I think we will also create a lot of questions in the mind of the people who are watching us. What I would like to say in the beginning, before going to talk a little bit about virtual mobility and the connection we have when we would like to implement it in the framework of our project CIVIS, especially with the micro-credentials. And before talking about this, I would like to say that my speech, it's in the name of a group. So I would like to stress that for virtual mobility to be functional, it's important that the core of this activity to be the cooperation. We cannot have virtual mobilities activities without cooperation, and I think it's very important to prove also through this speech I'm having right now, this presentation, that we are part of a group. Together with me, it's Romita, and I will hijack the moderator at some certain point, and I would invite him if he would like to talk a little bit more about a part of our common speech. And also in the audience are people who are part of our team in Virtual Mobility Task Force of CIVIS. So what I'm going to talk right now, they are ideas we developed together. Part of them are part of a work of a book, not a book, of material we are designing, and part of them were discussed in a virtual school on virtual mobilities we organized this summer, trying to develop more ideas together. So yes, this is about virtual mobility and how important it is for our nowadays universities. Like Lucian said before, we live in this year and we should be connected with this reality. We cannot ignore it. So since it's present with us, it's here to stay. We have to see how we can take a lot of benefits out of it. Yes, I will go a little bit beyond the concept. What is really the virtual mobility? Because we like the term. We like to use a lot of things about virtual activity right now. But what is it? So it's that educational academic opportunity which is no longer location dependent. It has a lot of benefits because it enables students to benefit linguistically, culturally, from all the point of view of their academic experience of working and learning in other contexts, other countries and universities, and in the same time is a sustainable green form of mobility. I will go back to these ideas I said until now because they will be part of the questions for everybody to reflect. As the synthesis, virtual mobility is learning anytime, any place, any path, any pace. It's a form of a modern way of bringing knowledge to more students. And this is something we would like to use because there are a lot of strengths of virtual mobility programs, and this is one of them. Other concepts around this concept, they are floating around. It's internationalization at home. It's not a new concept. It was built some years ago, but it's more and more pregnant in our university work. And this goes in doing a lot of things to add a touch of internationalization in the curriculum, to open it to different cultures whilst you're still at home. Yes, Tia already said about the MOOCs and their support for this kind of activity. There's a link, of course, between the two of them. But while the MOOCs represent the efforts of one university, it's their opinion on designing a special course. For virtual mobility, as I said in the beginning, it's very important to see that there are more cultures, more institutions, more countries involved, and we have a collaborative intercultural effort. It's also very important to talk a little bit about e-learning and distance learning, because sometimes when you hear the term virtual, we jump already in this area of e-learning. There are also distinctions between the concept, but we have to say that they are highly used in the virtual framework because virtual is mediated by technology, of course. About virtual exchanges and other content which is really used sometimes in place, replacing virtual mobility idea. And new concept, maybe Romita will talk a little bit more about it, digital enhanced mobility, because we think about having in mind the idea of mobility and doing it in different ways, physically, or if the case, digital enhanced mobility. So not replacing the idea of physical mobility at all, but adding this touch of digitally enhanced mobility. A lot of benefits, and I will not go very deep into this. We know that when we have mobile students, they do benefit out of this. More of them are engaged in learning, including the employed ones or special needs students, like Lucian was saying. Some of them are having their jobs, and because of the virtual mobility framework, they're able to participate in courses which otherwise could have been not an offer for them. Virtual mobility can be a special type of mobility for special needs students. They can benefit out of this since they are not in the position to travel, and maybe this traveling is not something they would appreciate, or they will not use as an opportunity for their learning path. Of course, they have also individual benefits for individuals, for students, benefits for teachers, and also for the whole learning environment, because the educational offer of the university can be enriched. We have cross-border collaborations, we have more visible offer of learning, we have flexibility of learning process. This is very important because we live in this world when flexibility should be a key. We cannot stay in very strict forms and expect to do the same course we have hundreds of years or several years ago, because this is the world we are in. And of course, any kind of mobility, including the virtual one, will develop a lot of skills for working in international teams. When you are staying at home, you are still doing this, and this is very important. And I will raise some reflection questions for all of us, trying to challenge you about this. Can virtual formats provide a similar learning experience compared to the physical mobility one? And being more specific, can virtual mobility provide the same benefits as those derived especially from immersion in another culture? We know that physical mobility means immersion in another culture, living day by day there, exchanging ideas. So are we maybe too optimistic in assuming that virtual mobility can do this? I would dare to say and to an answer, and I would say no, not really. I don't know if I challenge the people who are in the audience from this, but my personal answer is that you can do a lot of things useful to the students, to the teachers, to the universities using virtual mobility, but this part of immersion in another culture, this can be missing. And we have to think beforehand how to develop it more, because it's a very, very learning opportunity for students. It's part of their Erasmus exchange benefits and things. So we have to think together how to construct this, how to develop a lot of offers to complement this. And as I said here, that there are different approaches, and virtual mobility has a lot of benefits. It's at home, while the other physical, it's on site. You do not really you have to travel. This is home-based and ICT mediated. Face-to-face or no face-to-face activity, or some face-to-face activities for some time, from time to time. Physical mobility has a lot of costs, as we know. The virtual one is time and cost effective, but like Tia said, maybe sometimes we go for easier, more comfortable, cheaper solutions just because they are cheaper, like in some sort of disruptive innovation type activities. So this is a question we have to think about. And like I said, the physical mobility has a lot of potential in the area of social, cultural, and educational enrichment. And maybe the physical one should be more focused on adding this intercultural enrichment. Another question I would like to give as a challenge to the people who are listening to this presentation is about the fact that virtual mobility was advertised very often as being a green type of mobility. And this is for sure, it has a lot of credit, this idea, since we know that physical academic hypermobility of today generates a significant environmental burden, a lot of activities. The fact that we are meeting each other, we have conferences, we have exchanges, it's very beneficial, but we have to acknowledge that it produces a lot of burden for our world. So in this case, virtual mobility can be seen a green, eco-friendly, cleaner kind of mobility within our academic world, but we have to have in mind the fact that also the virtual mobility has its own carbon footprint as well. So this is something also to be added, but from this point of view, the environment can benefit a little bit more for not using so many flights or things like that to challenge the world we live in. So I will go to almost my last slide through this presentation. I think for the virtual mobility to be a successful project in university, we have to think what I wrote here just to challenge you and to remember this, the 5P of virtual mobility. I was talking about the fact that, of course, we need people. When we talk about mobility, we don't know about mobility of ideas only or about projects, but mobility of people. And we should be aware of the way they interact, about their abilities to do this, about their presence. We need purpose. And I said, I like to highlight this. The virtual mobility is not a purpose in itself. You are not doing because you want to tick some virtual mobility activity in your program and you want to report it back when you are ranked somehow. It needs a mutually negotiated aim. It needs a chance to develop something in a collaborative way. So we need a purpose, and after that we need the instrument and the way to doing it. It's a process, and it's very important to see it as a process. It involves a lot of reflection and transformative learning. It also involves, I suppose, a lot of processes which construct learning together. And I just said here, maybe we can to reflect about the idea of a connectivism, which is some sort of another theory about learning in these days we are in. So how we connect what we learn, how we connect to each other. So I raise you this challenge about connectivism. It involves also policies. You need strategic directions of the university, since the presentation is talking not just about concepts and pedagogical side of virtual mobility, but it's talking about the institutional rearrangements for favoring it. So policies are very important. And I put it last, but for me, it's the first one, since we are all working in the Department of Educational Sciences of the university. Pedagogy is for me very, very important. We have to build together another kind of pedagogy, from the brick and mortar pedagogy to the virtual mobility type of pedagogy. There are a lot of things to be analyzed. And I just put some of them here, how to enhance collaborative learning using technology, how to assess, and it was also discussed previously about how to assess, and a lot of challenges like that should go together with the idea of virtual mobility. And this is my last slide. The fact that we do not, it's a quotation from document, that we do not really have this kind of e-learning pedagogy for virtual mobility initiatives. So it's a challenge for us to develop collaboratively. And I think we are trying to do this in our project CIVIS. And I'm going back to the project because, as Romita was saying, it offers us a space to somehow adapt the framework Tia was talking about to our specific needs of our project within our Civic Alliance. And yes, we also use different way of defining the opportunities for virtual mobilities, and micro-credential, it's one credentials idea, it's one of them. And I think Romita can tell more about this as a proof that we are together and we are a team. Romita, please. I can go with the slides for you.
Thank you very much, Anca. Thank you very much. It's not necessary because I'm looking to the time now, and I'm aware that our colleagues and probably our special guests would like to add something or to raise questions. And this is why I will invite all the people from the audience to see what we are doing inside CIVIS in order to try to understand better what's in Rome's community. It's mentioning here the idea of having flexible and open learning paths for all curricular aspects inside the academia, and why not, to addition to the full degree programs, it's important on behalf of the university to offer smaller units of learning. And our students probably, as you will see in the next slide, are just try to ask about the process on how could be define, develop, implement, and recognize this kind of small flexible units, of course, who are leading to micro-credentials. Here you will see a quotation from the European universities and what the ECU, European Students' Union, are just saying about the designing or their own flexible curricula. That's so important because ECU sees a lack of common understanding to what the European degree is. I'm sure that you are understanding in this context that European alliances are in charge with issuing at the end of the process a European degree, more or less challenged now by the micro-credentials and the possibility to offer micro-credentials not only for students evaluation, but in the same time for exchanging in a broader sense the context of learning experiences and why not recognition. If we are going on, Anca, please be so faster. That's so important. That's an explanation what micro-credentials are, explaining the vision of CIVIS, because it's very important to speak on behalf of CIVIS. We are working inside this alliances, and we try to adapt what micro-credentials are in general expressivity of this concept and general meanings according to what CIVIS are expecting to use and to do by allocating micro-credentials to micro-programs. Please next. And why not digitally enhanced mobility? We have realized step by step that it's not very easy to have virtual mobility as a term, as an syntagma, recognized and appreciated by the students. They will very much to use, as Anca previously mentioned, the immersion in the culture, and they would like very much to attend physical and of course to embrace people and to have a more warming environment in educational context. And this is why in the SU's material, it's expressed here that virtual mobility can only be used to support physical mobility or enable it for students. And our students underline that it's so important to use probably an alternative of the terms of virtual mobility, the new one, which is digitally enhanced mobility, just for covering learning experiences and why not using micro-credentials. I'm sure, Anca, that we could stop here because it's very important to keep to the audience enough room for discussions. As a CIVIS part, we are very much and deeper engaged in the process of designing, and in 1 week from now, we are delivering a handbook about virtual mobility and what kind of virtual mobility could be described and used for creating micro programs which will be recognized and certified at the CIVIS level. And I'm sure that on the future, it will be very useful for our CIVIS students in order to increase mobility as a virtual mobility as an intermediary step to using face-to-face mobility, being very optimistically in the second semester of the academic year 2021. Thank you very much. I'm sure that until now a lot of questions has been already raised, and now I am very happy to open discussions by reading from chat questions from Karin Francois, Director of Doctoral School in Brussels University, addressed to Tia. Do we have any experience how the labor market is reacting on certificates of micro-credentials? This is the first questions, and I'm going on for reading and collecting the others. Thank you very much, Tia. The floor is yours.
Yes, we have some experiences. I think it's it's divided in two parts, let's say. There is quite a bit of there are quite a few studies globally as well about the fact that many employers are confused about micro-credentials. They don't necessarily know the term. And there's been even surveys made with those who hire people to different companies, whereby the HR professionals say that this doesn't really impact the promotion or recruitment. That being said, then there is the other extreme, which is in a way also supposed to be the benefit and the strength of micro-credentials, which is that the higher education institutions quite often also maybe developing these really to the purpose, to the labor market needs. So there is, for instance, a local company that says they need ABC skills. Let's work on this and develop a training course for this. Well, in that case, the employers are very familiar with it and they see the benefit of it and they will understand the certification that comes in the end of it. And it needs to be said that beyond the universities, the employers, especially the big employers, are major providers of micro-credentials. We talk about Google, LinkedIn, McDonald's. They do offer micro-credentials for their staff. So it's kind of a divided picture, but the idea would be that the micro-credentials should be understandable for the labor market, and that's where the benefit would be. But at the moment, evidence shows that beyond certain disciplines and certain professions, there may be confusion as to what they mean.
Thank you very much, Tia. Another question, Elena Marin. Can micro-credentials be seen and promoted by universities as a second chance opportunity for those people who, for whatever reasons, couldn't complete a full bachelor master program? Would these micro-credentials enable them rapid insertion on the labor market? Would like to answer to this question? Yeah, thank you.
In some cases, yes, it is the ideal that you don't have, for instance, time to go and wrap up your degree completely, but you can get a certain a skill or qualification just by doing a short course and then say to the employer that, okay, I have this skill. Yes. And it is also ideally thought that they could also, by doing some of these micro-credentials, eventually you might be able to get the degree as well by saying, I have learned all those things that you anyway had required in your curriculum. And yeah.
I agree with you. We are exploring inside the CIVIS to create a connection between the micro-credentials and the possibility to open micro-credentials to our alumni outside university, or the people who like very much, because we are representing the CIVIS as a category of civic universities engaged in the third mission of the university, in order to open this opportunity to others to attend courses and of course to get some certification, because the issuing context, it's so important. We are recognizing credits because our ECTS, and sometimes, as you previously said, Tia, it's very important to create some harmonization between ECTS and micro-credentials. Sometimes they are confusing the number of the accounting of ECTS or micro-credentials, and some mixtures are creating confusion. In this context, it's very important to have a very clear framework, and this is why we're working deeply on designing a framework which will be agreed by the partners and members of CIVIS. Yes, Tia, please.
Can I just continue on that?
Yes,
because I see that it actually linked, what you were also saying, links directly to another question that was posed, where the example was given that, for instance, in the IT field, people go to the, they start working and they learn a lot on the job before they finalize their studies and get the qualification. And then based on the micro-credential strategy, how can they practical engagement that they and what they've learned on the job, how could that allow them to facilitate the completion of the degree? This is the thing that we are now seeing with the micro-credential discussion. This goes back to a lot of the things that have been, let's say, on the surface already. For instance, the recognition of prior learning. When you learn something outside the institution, how can an institution recognize this kind of learning that you learn on the job or during your voluntary work and so on? So the micro-credential discussion has brought this back and said that we really should get this working, that we recognize also learning from other contexts. towards a conventional degree for a bachelor or master. So that people who know certain things wouldn't have to learn them, come to university to learn them together. So I think it is feasible. We have models, we have frameworks, but somehow we haven't been able to make this work. But let's hope that this discussion will help with it. But can I just comment, I know we're also running out of time. I really want to comment on some Anca's presentation. I really loved the 5 Ps. I think they are crucial. And I was thinking that they actually, to a certain extent, they apply to everything that's been discussed today. You presented them in the context of the virtual mobility that think about these 5 things. But I would say that they are really fundamental principles that would apply to micro-credentials or any kind of innovation. We shouldn't be just doing it because it's a buzzword, but we should be thinking about all the 5 Ps, including the purpose. Why are we doing it? Who wants this? Who does it benefit? Do we have the strategies? Do we have the pedagogies to put this in place in an effective way? So I thought that it was really good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tia. I'm sure that Anca is just ready to answer, and I will try also to connect Anca's intervention with another one from the chat. Question to Anca: do you have any examples about how universities integrate the cultural aspects in the virtual mobility? Anca, the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you, Tia, for highlighting more the idea of the 5 Ps and putting them in the context. I do also think that they are useful for any kind of educational act. In fact, no matter it's digital or it's face-to-face, I think we should have the purpose, people, policies, practices, pedagogy in place. And I do think in this, and I'm very happy that you took it over and gave it a greater light. And about the question, if I have examples about how to integrate the cultural aspect in the virtual mobility, this is something I would like to find myself, and that's why I was thinking if there are suggestions, I would appreciate them. What I can say right now that for this, the university which are organizing this kind of activities should create specially on purpose spaces for exchanges and cultural exchanges. You don't expect that they will happen just like that because people are in contact, because sometimes they are focused in elaborating different projects and things, and it's a side effect of working together, of course, but it should be more than a side effect. You should create space in the curriculum, for example, for doing this. You should create projects which imply a lot of intercultural communication. I do remember, as a very, very small example, when we have our virtual school on virtual mobility, we have the first virtual mobility cafe I've ever participated, and Romita here just hosted, and we exchanged a lot of things about our cultures. We were together. It was a framework where we could touch this idea as well. So I do think that we should create in the curriculum specially designed spaces for cultural exchanges and thinking about common or different values we have in our cultures. Our own perspectives should find a specially designed place in the curriculum.
Thank you very much, Anca. According to the schedule, we'll have 2 minutes more. But now we have another question raised. We speak a lot of how micro-credentials benefit market and employers, but how are benefiting the building of academic community and academic knowledge. It's a question raised by Elena Ungureanu, our colleague from the University of Bucharest. Would you like to answer, Tia, to the question, to Elena's questions?
Yes, I think the academic community has traditionally been very research focused. I don't know if we think of building academic community in that sense, I don't know if they are building it, but I think they would be shaping it. At EUA, we are currently working on a vision for universities 2030. And they're talking to our members, which include UNICA members. So I have to say, and CIVIS alliances are also members of EUA. We've talked a lot about the universities needing to be open to society. That, you know, we would like to see in 10 years a university that is interconnected with the society in a multitude of ways. And maybe in this way, the micro-credentials developing them can help us to be more open to the society and kind of shape our academic community to be open to the society and respond quickly. So I would say it's about kind of shaping it, giving it one additional nuance without losing, of course, the traditional research-based community. So I do think it has the benefit of making the staff and perhaps the students as well to think, what do we do this for? How do we serve the society by doing this?
Thank you very much, Tia, for the answer. Thank you very much, Elena, for the question. Now we are going to the last part of our webinar. I'm very grateful, Tia and Anca, for wonderful presentation, and I've been so motivated to work and to contribute together to our colleagues from the audience to the success of this event. I'm very grateful, Tia, for having you here together with us, as special guests on behalf of EUA, and of course, as part of the reflection group on how the university structure or vision will like on the next years after this pandemic period. Also, there is on the chat special requirement related to the process of sharing feedback. And you were kindly asked as an audience member to fill a short evaluation survey on the address which is provided by our host. I'm very grateful, dear colleagues, for your presence and for discussions and for highly motivated questions and discussions raised together on the chat. And now I'm pass the floor to Sorin for making the final, and to Luciano for the preparing concluding remarks, and why not some perspective on how EduLAB UNICA will look like in the next year.
Thank you, Romita. I will take the floor, and if Luciano would like to join me, he's more than welcome. But so far, I think we have 4 wonderful presentations, very insightful, coping with the actual situation. And this is why I would like to thank again to our panelists, to Lucian and Clara, and to Tia and Anca, and also to you, Romita. You was a multi-role person today, having 3 roles. And this is what we have to do during these times, to be flexible and to adapt to the context. And I think that we have learned that from our speakers. I would like also to thank to Romita, my colleague, and to Luciano, also my colleague from UNICA, but also from our colleagues, Laura and Laura from UNICA, for giving us the necessary support and guidance. And I think that if there are no other interventions, I think we will end this 21st meeting of the EduLAB in a very virtual way. We would like to meet next time physically, but who knows what would be. We hope that we will be able to do that. But even so, I think we adapted to the context, and we try to deal with virtuality in a very virtual way, which is not very easy. You know it now by heart, and I'm pretty sure that most of you have at least 1 or 2 of these kind of meetings per day. But at the end of the day, I think we have to think of those beautiful ideas. I mean, academic and blended mobility, virtual mobility, micro-credentials, the role of face-to-face learning, and the innovative pedagogies provided by Lucian from the very beginning. So there is a lot of food for thought. If Luciano would like to add something at this point.
Thank you, Sorin. Just a couple of words to thank you very much again. The University of Bucharest promoted really an excellent event as a strong member of UNICA and CIVIS. I think also this is a very good example of the new alliances that indeed are a very new reality in Europe, working together with the traditional networks. UNICA is 30 years old. Actually, officially, CIVIS is only 1 year old. This is still a baby, but kicking and screaming very strongly and very active. So I think this is again is a very good cooperation. Again, many thanks to Romita and Sorin for chairing so well the two sessions, to all the speakers from again UNICA and CIVIS. Many thanks to the European University Association, to Tia Loukkola for sharing this important information. Indeed, macro-credential, as I said in the beginning, is really key. Again, is another revolutionary element in our universities, and I think it's very good to discuss and to see, how to proceed in the near future. So thank you again to the participants in this event, and to the UNICA office, the two excellent laureates, who organized this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Luciano. So besides this, so many thanks to the various networks we are involved in. We would like to thank also to the European Commission, especially to Adrian Kirali, who was part of this meeting at the very beginning and shared with us the vision of the Commission. So I think that only together we will succeed in Europe to make it strong and better. And better Europe would be an educated Europe. So we have to learn and to cope with this situation. Thank you all. Thank you, Luciano, and UNICA and CIVIS and University of Bucharest. See you at the next UNICA meeting very soon. It will be in January at the University of Ljubljana.
Perfect.
All the best.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.